you. Welcome back. Despite what the graphic said, it's just Joe and I. Clack's not there.
Yeah, I laughed when I saw that because I was like, we're a man down per usual, but
Yeah, it's pretty standard at this point, but the show must go on, as they say. I like the nice little Vikings colors we have going, but I'll change it back to our red.
hey, we're
So
rocking the red because the Caps
yeah,
are playing.
they're gonna get smacked by the Florida Panthers, unlike
Probably.
my St. Louis Blues, who won 4-0 last night in Game 1.
Must be nice. We'll see how that goes for us tonight.
So draft happened, right? It's all over now, and what'd you think? Just give me your first immediate impression of this draft.
I liked it. I mean, it was very, very unpredictable. I mean, if you would have told me that one quarterback would have gone in the first round, I probably would have called you crazy because as leading up to the draft, there was rumors that we'd have like 4 or 5 guys taken the first. I never really bought that, but to only have one quarterback taken was very surprising. And just overall, there were a lot of surprises, a lot of players that slid. I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I know my team was the Commanders was able to get Sam Howell in the 5th round, and he was the favorite to be the number 1 quarterback taken like last year. But just a lot of surprises, and I really enjoyed it. And I think it was fun hopping on here, even though we were on here for 3 hours. It was fun breaking it down and whatnot.
So my one grievance, and I don't think they're ever going to stop this, but like on day 3 of the draft, right? Once you get to like the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, they kind of stopped like even talking about the picks. They would just kind of roll across the screen, and then like they'd be having, I think like during one of our picks, there was an Ice Cube concert going on and stuff, and they just like don't mention anything about the players. And this might be a hot take, but I think that's where they should talk about players more, right? Like, because those are players you've never heard of. Everyone knows, like everyone that's watching the draft knows who Kenny Pickett is. But like, you get to Jalen Naylor, you get to I don't know who else. You get to what's his name? I'm trying to find out, but the tight end Nick Muse that we picked, like no one knows that. The Nick Muse is the only reason anyone might know Nick Muse is that picture of him, at South Carolina. So, but I don't know. So I kind of want to talk about our respective teams a little bit. So just go like maybe pick by pick, maybe just the major picks, whatever you want to do. Just tell me about the Commanders a little bit, how you think they did.
So, contrary to popular belief, I actually enjoyed what the Commanders did. I mean, they pretty much, before the draft, told people exactly what they wanted to do. They said they wanted to give Carson Wentz some weapons, and they wanted more picks. And so sitting there at 11 with Kyle Hamilton on the board, Jamison Williams on the board, and Chris Olave on the board, all guys who were mocked to them, who they reportedly really liked. I thought it was pretty cool that they just decided to go their own route, and they traded back with the Saints, who were very hungry and wanted Chris Olave. And so the Saints took Olave, and Washington got the 3rd round pick back, which they had traded for the Carson Wentz trade. So that was huge. And they also picked up a 4th. And ultimately, I think the value that they got from Dotson, Robinson, and the safety that they got from, I can't remember where it was.
Percy Butler from Louisiana.
Yeah, Percy Butler. I think the value from that was a lot more than if they had just stayed where they were and took Olave. And actually, I don't think the drop-off between Olave and Dotson is all that much. I mean, they're different players, but despite having not a great offense at Penn State and not a great quarterback throwing him the ball, whether that be due to injuries and just overall play, Jahan Dotson was one of the more slept-on players, I think, in this draft class. And I think that the draft class overall they had really reflects the attitude that Ron Rivera is trying to instill in Washington and the culture change, because we've all seen how toxic it's been and the players that they've had in the past. But I think Robinson, Dotson, Mathis, these guys that they selected all fit the Ron Rivera attitude. So I really enjoyed their class overall.
you got to be on cloud nine. They got not only one but two Alabama players this year, continuing to the Alabama Commanders.
The
So
Washington Tide.
the Washington Tide, even better. How do you feel about Sam Howell? I know you guys picked him in the 5th round, and you were actually pretty happy about that.
I liked the Howell pick. Like I talked about earlier, I was very surprised because he, a year ago, was slated to be one of the first quarterbacks taken, and even leading up to the draft, probably a couple months ago, was a first-round pick, French first round, maybe early second. So the fact that they were able to get him in the 5th was just mind-blowing. I mean, I kept saying at some point they have to get Howell. At some point they have to get Howell. And I understand the reasoning to a certain extent about why they did want to draft a quarterback. I know Carson Wentz in the past, when Philly took Jalen Hurts, was very upset by that. But at the same time, in the nicest way possible, who cares,
Yeah.
Your job as an NFL quarterback is to compete and be the best player in your position room. And if you're so worried about a rookie 5th round pick or I guess a 2nd round pick in the Philly case, if you're so worried about that, then I don't think you really have the stones to be an NFL quarterback. So that bothered me that they said, oh, well, we made sure we talked with Wentz and made sure it's okay. Like, no. It's a competition. I mean, especially Washington, there has not been a consistent quarterback, since as long as I can remember. So there's no guarantees. Carson Wentz needs to play his ass off and know that Sam Howell is looming over his shoulder and is a pretty damn good quarterback in his own regard.
I think that you kind of touched on it later in your point that you're making, but I think that there is a big difference between a 2nd round quarterback and a 5th round quarterback. A 2nd round quarterback, you expect to at least compete for the starting job or one take over next year or the year after. And in the 5th round, at that point, that's a backup / a developmental guy, which is exactly what Howell is. He's he's coming in as the backup, maybe even the 3rd string behind Taylor Heineke, and then they hope that he can develop into a guy. But I think that for Carson Wentz's ego, that should be a little bit less insulting than drafting a guy in the 2nd round. I do think the whole quarterback slide thing, though, was more, and fans do this every year with certain players, certain positions. I think the fans of the NFL as a whole talk themselves up into believing the quarterbacks were better or higher ranked on people's boards than the NFL teams did, if that makes sense. At some point they were just like, well, Malik Willis has such, he throws deep, he runs fast, he has to be a top pick. And then I don't think the NFL teams ever bought into that, if that makes sense.
Well, I don't even necessarily think it's the fans. It's all media driven. So the media creates these narratives, and the fans see them on, if they're watching NFL Network or see them on ESPN, and then they start believing it in their head.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's kind of ridiculous. And this year was proof that you don't have to believe everything that you're told. I mean, these quote unquote, what makes a draft analyst, right? I mean, These guys are just as wrong about the picks as you and I are, but somehow they're getting paid a lot of money to sit on TV and talk about the draft and spin narratives, in different ways. And I mean, obviously the NFL draft is very profitable and somebody's going to, make money off of it. But at the same time, you can't hang on every word that somebody says about a player, because every year we see players slip who we thought we were going to go in the 1st and vice versa. I know, to bring it back to the Commanders, Phil Mathis wasn't supposed to be drafted until, I guess, the 3rd round, but people were so irritated that Washington took him in the 2nd, and the team said that, they took him there because they thought that he would go, within the next 10 picks, and then his agent came out and said the same thing. I mean, whether you want to believe that or not, it's up to you, but it's just proof that nobody really knows what they're talking about when it comes to who's going to be selected and where.
Yeah, and Especially Clack. Clack doesn't know anything. Like, I'm glad that you and I were pretty on fire with our mock draft. Like, we both did pretty well. I don't know what he was doing.
He
I
was off
remember,
in La La Land.
I mean, the biggest one, and I would have got this wrong too, was I think he had Jalen Weidermeier sneaking into the first round. I don't think Jalen Weidermeier didn't end up.
He did not have Weidermeier.
Maybe it was maybe it was early second, but Jalen Weidermeier was his favorite tight end.
He was Jalen Weidermeier was undrafted too.
Yeah, he signed with the Bills. Apparently, the story behind that, just side tangent before I get to the Vikings, is that apparently he showed up like super out of shape to his own pro day. And then apparently he got frustrated like halfway through and then just kind of half-assed all his routes and stuff. And people
that's always a great idea.
Yeah, especially when this is like a job interview basically for like millions of dollars and you just give up.
Well, none of the tight ends had good pro days. They all had really bad pro days.
But that makes it even worse because like everyone else is struggling too. You might as well like try to. That makes it even worse.
No, I mean I get what you're saying.
The first tight end taken, right? Wasn't he taken by who was it? The Bucks picked a tight end out of Washington.
Trey McBride was. The Cardinals took Trey McBride in the second round.
Gotcha. I was
Colorado
thinking
State.
Yeah, and then the Bucks with the first pick in the third round picked Cade Otton out of Washington.
Okay, yeah,
that's who I was thinking of. So. Yeah, you talked about the Commanders a little bit. I'll talk about the Vikings. I'll just kind of go pick by pick. I was annoyed at the time of the draft, as you might remember, about the Lewis Cine pick with the 32nd pick.
You were pissed. You weren't annoyed. You were pissed.
I was pissed because, and let me explain my reasoning. Number one, I'll admit it, I was a little ignorant. I didn't study much on safeties coming into the draft. I basically just saw it as if we take a safety, we're going to be taking Kyle Hamilton at 12. So the fact that we didn't take Kyle Hamilton at 12 when he was there, and then we picked another safety, I was annoyed because I watched a little bit of Lewis Cine tape, and I'm more like sold on him now. He's a lot more athletic. He's actually an athletic freak. Like he's ran a 4.4 40 at like 6'4", and he hits hard. Like he takes people's heads off. And so he needs to work on man coverage a little bit, but he's probably going to be playing zone for us most of the time anyway. And he's also just extremely smart, apparently. Like he knows the ins and outs of every. I remember a Georgia coach saying that he could teach pretty much anyone off the street Georgia's defensive playbook because he's like. So I'm more okay with that pick. But what super turned it around for me was after the whole trade played out. So we traded with Detroit. We had number 12. We gave them 12 for 32 and 34. And a fourth round pick or a third round pick. But so then we used 32 to pick Cine. We used 34. We traded back with the Packers, actually, interestingly enough. So we traded with two division rivals to start our draft. But then we ended up trading back up and we got Andrew Booth Jr. And this is why I'm much more okay with it because Andrew Booth Jr., like, I had a lot. There was people that were mocking him to us at 12. We got him at 43 or 42. And if he can stay healthy, I think he has potential to be one of the best corners from this draft. Like I was telling you beforehand, but he has the most insane like ball tracking skills I've ever seen from a college cornerback. Like, and I mean, he's everything, right? He's fast. He is physical. He's good in man. He's great at tracking the ball. He's good in zone. Health is the only thing. That's why he slipped so far. He's always been injured throughout his whole career. So if he can stay healthy, like I love the pick, and he's going to be great. Ed Ingram, we picked him at 59. Interesting. A lot of people had him a lot lower, like in the 80s or 90s. After he got picked, it came out that he got suspended from LSU, and it was his freshman year or sophomore year for a sexual assault case that came out that was in the works. And so I don't know if people had him ranked lower because of character issues or because of skill. Because pure football, he was the highest graded pass blocker in the SEC. The highest of any SEC player.
Wow.
Pass blocking, which is exactly what the Vikings need. We need because we've been building our team to be a run blocking team. With Kevin O'Connell, hopefully we're going to have more pass blockers and not get Kirk Cousins flattened every time he drops back. So pure football skill is there. Off the field issues are a question. A lot of people weren't happy about that. Apparently our team like vetted it and thought it was okay. and he was a minor at the time. He was 16, so the case is sealed. You never know. We'll never know the full details. Apparently, it was something to do with him being 16 and like a 14-year-old girl. That's all I know. I don't want to get into it. I don't want to even speculate. It's awful, and I feel like weird about rooting for him. But he's a Viking now, so hopefully he'll at least be good for the team. Third round, we picked Brian Asamoah. That was kind of a head scratcher at the time because Kobe Dean was still on the board, but Dean felt like hard. Apparently, Dean was more hurt than people thought, and it came out that he had like a shoulder injury that he opted not to get surgery for, and instead wanted to rehab, and it like messed him up. Brian Asamoah, I actually like a lot. He extremely high motor, super athletic again. Physical. Needs to work on man coverage a little bit, but with Jordan Hicks and Eric Kendricks, he can afford to sit for a year or two, and he kind of fit. And if he can develop a little bit, he fits perfectly the mold of like a modern linebacker where they're fast and can cover and can hit. And so I think he can be really good for us. I'll go a little bit quicker now. Caleb Evans, cornerback out of Missouri. Kwesi, our GM, afterwards said that before the draft, he gave a quote that he was like, there's a player that I had conversations with in a dark room, and sometimes I sit at home thinking about them. Came out and said after the draft that this was the guy that he was talking about, Caleb Evans out of Mizzou. We picked him in the 4th round. Super raw, but super long, super fast. Like, basically, you talked about your theme, like, high character, people Ron Rivera wants to build around. Our theme for this draft was get people that have the traits you're looking for and develop them into football players. We picked, so you know what RAS is, like raw athletic score?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically, for anyone that doesn't know, it's like it takes all their combine things, their jumps and their runs and agility drills and whatever, and it scores them based on like a percentile. And 8 and above, I think, is like really good. 9 is elite. Like 10, it goes up to 10. And I think every player that we drafted that wasn't a lineman was in the 9s or higher for raw athletic score. Yeah. So basically that's what our coach and GM were looking for. They're looking for people that were really had speed and whatever else you're looking for, and then hope they can develop. And that's what he is. We picked a defensive lineman out of the University of Minnesota. I'm not a UM fan, but I know a lot of UM fans are pretty excited. I don't know that much about him. We picked a running back, Ty Chandler, out of North Carolina. People said he was kind of a good value pick. He only had 1 year starting because he was at Tennessee and was kind of underutilized. But his 1 year starting, he had over 1,000 yards. So he's Alexander Madison's replacement in a year, I think. Madison is going to look for a starting job somewhere, and we're not going to pay him the big bucks to be our backup. He's a free agent after this year, so it's probably preparing for that. For Darion Lowe, tackle out of Virginia Tech. It's a really tackle out of Illinois. I don't know why I thought Virginia Tech. He, interesting name. I don't know what about him. They're basically the same kind of mold, really high athletic traits. Needs to develop a little bit, hoping that he can maybe be that. He's a 6th round tackle, You're not going to get a lot of that. Jaylen Naylor out of Michigan State.
This is the one that I didn't even realize until you mentioned it earlier. I didn't even know. I thought Naylor was going back for another year. I didn't realize that he was a senior or he was draft eligible. I thought that he was younger. This is the one that was surprising to me because, 1, I didn't know he was in this draft, and 2, I would not have thought that he would have gone in the 6th round. That was definitely surprising to me because you watched him in Michigan State. He was a baller this year.
Yeah. This was one that I know a lot of my fellow Vikings fans were super excited about. He, he's speedy. He's pretty shifty. He has great, hands. He reminds me in a way of Stephon Diggs coming out. Obviously, I'm not saying he's going to be Stephon Diggs. Let me put that right there. That's a very hard ask. But in that he's a 5th, 6th round guy that fell because of injuries and not having a great quarterback that kind of underutilized him. But I could see him having a much bigger impact at the next level when he has a guy that can give him the ball. And at the very least, we don't really have any speed guys on the team. I mean, we drafted Amir Smith-Marset last year, who's kind of a speed guy. But if Naylor breaks into the rotation, he'll at least add the vertical aspect to the team that we were kind of lacking. So I'm pretty excited about Jaylen Naylor. I think he's going to be At worst, he can be a punt returner. At best, he breaks into the rotation, becomes wide receiver 3 or 4. And then 7th round, we picked Nick Muse out of South Carolina. Like, he had the picture where he was looking all fabulous. And because of that, I'm sold. Didn't really have that much production, like, in college. He was just kind of, but also it's South Carolina, so no one really had that much production coming out of South Carolina.
Enough.
So I don't really know. He's a 7th round tight end. We needed a tight end. I wanted Jalen Weidermeier. Jalen Weidermeier didn't even get drafted. So I guess no one wanted Jalen Weidermeier but me and Clack. But yeah, so that's our draft. And overall, like I said, we got a lot of guys that were super athletic that hope we can develop them into players. And I don't think it's the worst strategy. I think that we got 2 immediate starters in 2 positions of need. Cam Bynum, I thought, was a fine safety, but I think that Lewis Cine is enough of an upgrade where it's like, you might as well take him. And apparently we took him at 32 because the Buccaneers really liked him, and we're probably going to pick him at 33 if we didn't take him right then. So, but then Andrew Booth steps in and immediately starts. And the rest of the guys, they're potentially going to be good in a year or 2 from now. Maybe even Assamoa or Ingram can have an impact year 1.
Yeah, just kind of building off of what you said, I really like the Vikings draft because let's say you sit there and you take Hamilton or Williams, you're adding 1 starter there. The fact that you have 2 guys now with your first and second round picks that are going to be starting your secondary, and then also I'm looking at our lads who projects like the depth charts for teams. And they have Ed Ingram as your starting guard.
Yeah, our starting right guard is a weak spot, and it's kind of a big question mark because we have Wyatt Davis, who we drafted last year, who I was really high on. He didn't even play. But again, that now, after everything comes out, that's like was it because he wasn't good, or was it because Mike Zimmer has this weird vendetta against playing rookies? We'll never know.
Yeah, your guard situation has just been like a revolving door, pretty much.
So this might be kind of interesting prediction, but I predict, barring the signing of JC Treader from the Browns, because he's like a name that's been linked to us a lot. There's no like steam there yet, but we might go out and try to sign a center. We declined Garrett Bradbury's 5th-year option. He's our weak link on an offensive line. Ed Ingram took center snaps and played center at the Senior Bowl. I'm going to make a hot prediction that Ed Ingram actually starts as our center this year, and either Wyatt Davis or Chris Reed, who we signed from the Colts, starts at right guard. So,
yeah, but I don't know. Overall, I think our teams maybe not necessarily had the splashiest draft, but they added a lot of value and depth, and that's kind of it's more about that in the long run than it is about. As much as everybody loves splashy pick, like the Lions trading up to get J-Mo, which we love J-Mo, and I'm sure he'll do well on the Lions, but like you gotta add as many players as you can and give yourself a chance on hitting on those draft picks.
Yeah, Kwesi made 6 draft day trades, but he turned our first round pick into Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, Brian Assamoa, and
Brian Assamoa will probably see decent snaps this year too. It's like a second string guy. So
yeah, he probably slots in as our 3rd linebacker behind Hicks and Kendricks. So, and I think one other guy, it might have been the Ed Ingram pick, actually. Like, it might have been our top 4 that they turned the first pick into. But overall, like, as much as I was like mad at the time that we didn't pick Hamilton and picked a safety instead, I would gladly take those 4 over Kyle Hamilton any day of the week.
Yeah, so. I mean, you didn't. That's the thing with trades. You have to like sit back and wait and see how they play out. And like, obviously, you didn't know you were getting Booth. If you thought you were getting Booth, you'd be like, "Oh, we won that trade."
Right. Because, shoot, if we took Booth at 32, I would have been a lot happier at the time. So we kind of talked about our teams enough. I wanted to ask, who do you think the biggest reach of the draft is? Or maybe just the first round?
Man, that's tough. I'm honestly I don't know if this is a hot take, but I think the Jaguars taking Trayvon Walker at 1 is a reach. I think they kind of bought into the pro day combine hype and what the media was saying about Trayvon Walker and his upside, which he has pretty high upside. But at the same time, you gotta pick a guy with the number 1 pick who's gonna you know what you're getting out of him, right? And so I still think that Aiden Hutchinson should have been the pick, and slam dunk for Detroit to get him at 2. But I don't know about Walker. It's kind of a desperation move for Trent Baalke and company in Jacksonville, and I think that was a bit of a reach. I mean, that's just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Other ones, let's see. I'm looking.
I have a couple.
I thought Kenyon Green at 15 was a bit high. I'm not the biggest Kenny Pickett fan. I think he'll fit Pittsburgh better than people think he will after, taking time to think about it. I think him at 20 was a reach. Obviously, Cole Strange to the Patriots. Yeah. I can't say that I'd be pissed as a Patriots fan because they've won a lot of Super Bowls, but at the same time, like, that pick made 0 sense. And then Quay Walker, I guess, at 22 to the Packers was a bit of a reach, but, they like those Georgia guys, and they got Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt, so
after the first round, they had drafted 4 straight Georgia players in the first round.
Yeah, because they took Stokes last year.
Stokes, and then I think there was someone before Stokes too.
I can't remember, but I did like that the Christian Watson pick. I think Christian Watson, if he's going to succeed for anybody, it's going to be Aaron Rodgers and Green Bay. I mean, the dude's 6'4". The only knock on him is drops, and Aaron Rodgers is going to get that shit taken care of.
But no, see, I think that's not necessarily true because, like, you look at Marquez Valdes-Scantling, right? That was his big thing. To me, Christian Watson, like, seems more like a Marquez Valdes-Scantling replacement than he does a, Devontae Adams replacement. He is super athletic, but he dropped like 12% of the passes thrown his way this year, and he's not exactly the most polished route runner. So I don't think you can use him in the Devontae Adams role, which is like short routes and just get open and catch everything. I'm not arguing that he's going to be bad yet. I have no idea what to think of him, but I think that he was the 7th receiver taken in the draft for a reason. If that makes sense. I think that this might be a hot take. I said that a lot on this show. Wow, I need to stop saying that. Derek Stingley was kind of a reach in my opinion. I think that I understand the reasoning he went 3. Like, he has all the potential in the world, but also he was good 1 year as a freshman and then was hurt a bunch of years and then hasn't really put it together since then. And to draft him over Sauce, who was just coming off one of the best cornerback seasons I've seen, is kind of interesting. I mean, you're banking a lot on his upside.
Stupid pick for them.
I don't know, and
I would have taken Sauce. You can't just bank on 1 year of good highlights as a freshman.
1 year, like 3 years ago, yeah. Well, and it's funny saying that because I was pounding the table for us to take him at 12. But I think taking a guy top 3, if you're taking a guy, even like top 10, you should be getting an immediate impact guy. Like, there's enough of those to go around. And if you're not getting a guy that immediately impacts your team like that, then maybe trade back and try to get a couple of guys. I don't know. But I think that Drake London, I mean, I've talked about Drake London enough. I won't even get into it. I don't like Drake London this year, but he was the first receiver taken. I think that Tyler Smith out of Tulsa was kind of a weird pick for the Cowboys. I get it. They needed an offensive lineman, but it seems like they picked, a really raw guy to step in right away and to protect Dak Prescott, and I don't know how that's going to work out. And then you talked on the Cole Strange pick. I get it. I think more people are mad than they should be. I think that he probably would have been gone by their second pick, so it's not too weird. They also picked but more so than Cole Strange, they picked, was it Tyquan Thornton out of Baylor in the second round? That was kind of interesting to me. Picked a receiver out of Baylor in the second round. He was like a 3rd or 4th round guy in most mocks. So I think that was a bigger reach than Cole Strange. Enough being negative, though. Who do you think the biggest steals of the draft were?
Like which team, or we're just talking about players?
Just like give me one or two guys in the first round that you thought was good value.
Both of these are going to be Ravens picks. I thought the Ravens getting Kyle Hamilton at 14.
And David Ojabo in the second.
Yeah, and then getting Tyler Linderbaum. But also Jermaine Johnson for the Jets. That was a steal.
Mm-hmm.
They ended up having 3 first-round picks. So that's probably who I would say. And obviously, this goes without being said that I thought the Ravens were probably the biggest winners overall as a team, just because the sheer value at their picks. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of Marquise Brown. Vinny, who we had on here, also Ravens fan, not the biggest fan of Marquise Brown. So I think turning quote-unquote useless Marquise Brown into Tyler Linderbaum, I think was a huge switcherooski for them. Even though you say that you're not the biggest Linderbaum fan, I think I would take Linderbaum as my 25th pick over Marquise Brown, who hasn't really done anything.
I also will qualify that I didn't like the idea of rolling the dice on Linderbaum at 12. At 25, I think it's better. You still never like to waste a first-round pick if he doesn't end up being good. But I think that if we would have traded back to 25 and picked Linderbaum, I would have been less mad about it if we would have picked him at 12. Overall, I know it's not even like it's not like surprising because they had 3 first-round picks, but I think the Jets were probably my big winner. They had 2 top 10 picks, but they got some great players with those 2 picks: Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, who in my mock draft was the first receiver that was going, and then trading back up to get Jermaine Johnson. So I thought they killed it. I thought the Ravens killed it. Like you said, value picks everywhere. I also want to give a shout out to the Chiefs. The Chiefs did great, and especially in the first round, because for my steals, I pretty much agree with you. But I will also say getting Trent McDuffie at 21 and then George Karlaftis at 30, good picks for them. I think
that fills 2 needs that they had.
And then they also managed to get Sky Moore at like 50-something. And no one in this class is going to replicate, Tyreek Hill. But if anyone's going to come close, it might be Sky Moore, who's a very fast receiver, And they got him in the second round. So I like what they did. And one of the most head-scratching picks, I'll just say this, is that the Jaguars.
I was just about to say, I was looking at this, and I know I talked about them getting Trayvon Walker and how that was risky, but I think Devin Lloyd at 27 is also a risky guy. So you could have 2 picks in the first round that end up being complete busts.
It's funny because I wasn't going to say Devin Lloyd. I was going to say Chad Muma in the second or third round because they picked Devin Lloyd. They picked 2 middle linebackers in the first 3 rounds, which I thought was a very interesting move. It's reminds me of the Washington taking Robert Griffin III and Kirk Cousins. I know it ended up working out. The third round guy actually had a better career than the first round guy, but it's just kind of funny. Like when you use 2 picks in the first 3 rounds on the same position, it's kind of strange. I mean, I know they run a 3-4, so they use 2 middle linebackers. And I know Miles Jack just left, but actually that's how I learned that Miles Jack left. I missed that in the whole barrage of news that he ended up leaving.
Mm-hmm.
But let's see. Favorite picks, least favorite picks. That's basically the same thing. What about UDFAs? The 7th round ended, right? There's a couple people. Who do you think had some of the best UDFA signings? Because my personal favorite was the Chiefs again with Justin Ross. I was hoping we would take a late round flyer on him. Apparently his medicals are pretty dire, but the Chiefs were also the people that drafted Trey Smith last year. Apparently their doctors just don't care. They're like, if they die on the field, it's fine. But if he can, avoid getting paralyzed from a bad hit, he could turn out to be really, really good. I mean, ever since our sophomore year, I've been a huge Justin Ross truther after the national championship game. I've never seen a wide receiver single-handedly beat a team like he did. Trevor Lawrence got all the praise, but Justin Ross bailed Trevor Lawrence out so hard on so many of the throws. So he could be dominant if he ever can return to pre-injury Justin Ross.
I think I'll probably go quarterback route. Carson Strong, who ended up signing with the Eagles, definitely has an absolute cannon for an arm, but I think the question for him was his feet. And it's hard to be a great NFL quarterback today with cinder block feet. But he signed with the Eagles. I'm reading it right here. He signed a historic contract for $300,000 guaranteed base money, so that's a lot.
Yeah.
Kind of weird situation for the Eagles. We don't really know how they feel about Jalen Hurts, but Carson Strong is, no pun intended, a strong guy, and I think he could be a good backup for them. And then also Tyler Goodson, who was the running back for Iowa last year, he signed with the Green Bay Packers. He was very productive while at Iowa. I mean, Iowa had one of the best offensive lines in the country, so maybe that's part of it when you got Linderbaum blocking for you up front. But Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, and Tyler Goodson, that's a pretty good running back room, and so that was a good one for Green Bay. That's pretty much all I could think of for the UDFAs. I mean, you already hit on the biggest one with Justin Ross. He's the guy that probably has the biggest upside as far as UDFA signings.
I also, even if he showed up out of shape, even if he underperformed, Jalen Weidermeier, I think, could be a really good pickup.
Well, he was supposed to go in the first round, according to our own Josh Clack.
I think it was the second. Let's give him some credit. I think it might have been the second.
Josh
Clack. But yeah, he went to the Bills too, so that's a great situation for him. I mean, they don't have a particularly super strong tight end room, and also he adds another element to their offense that they can.
What about O.J. Howard?
Oh shoot, I did forget they got O.J. Howard. You're right.
Dawson Knox and O.J. Howard.
Okay, I was thinking just Dawson Knox and no one else because it was Dawson Knox and Tyler Croft or something like that.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, O.J. Howard hasn't been as good as many had hoped, including ourselves.
He also went from number 2 on the depth chart to number 3 when they brought over Gronk and never really had a chance to work around it.
Yeah, that's true. They had a cluttered room, and he definitely, I don't think, really got a fair shake at the position when he got Brady's best friend, favorite target. 2
is fine, 3's a crowd in the tight end room. The Vikings signed a UDFA. His name is Luigi Villain. But it looks like Luigi Villain, and people were saying, isn't that just Waluigi? Which I love the name. He was our first UDFA we signed to, and people were just posting pictures of Luigi everywhere. Or Waluigi everywhere. It's from Wake Forest. It's Luigi spelled with a J. But I don't know. UDFAs, one thing that made me laugh a little bit, okay, is that I understand they're trying to send a message out to UDFAs and don't give up, keep up with your career. And that's great. That's great. But I think it was some draft guy, or maybe it was even the NFL account itself, tweeted there's more UDFAs in the Hall of Fame than first rounders or something. But it makes sense if you think about it, because there's hundreds of UDFAs every year. There's only 32 guys in the first round. So just mathematically, yes, that's going to happen when there's hundreds, possibly theoretically, everyone in the world is a UDFA except the 256 people or whatever that were taken. So
yeah, that always really gets on my nerves. And people are Tom Brady got drafted in the 6th round. It's yeah, it happened. It's nobody's saying it's not.
But how many people have drafted that haven't been good?
The chances of it happening are extremely low.
Yeah.
Especially, I feel more so nowadays, because the evaluation process is so deep, and the amount of time spent looking at prospects. I mean, you overlook guys all the time, but I feel it's more thorough than it used to be. So that definitely irks me. But I mean, they want these guys to be hopeful, and I get that. But at the same time, it's come on.
Well, and that's the thing too, is there's always normally 1 or 2 later round guys that turn out to be good from every draft. That's 1 or 2 guys from 90 plus picks every year, 1 or 2 guys every year. So I'm sitting here talking about, I think Jaylen Naylor could be a pretty good part of our team, and you were too. But looking at it realistically, he was a 6th round pick for a reason. And so I think fans are overly optimistic a lot of times. I think that in like most of these UDFAs probably won't and contribute in any serious way. But I mean, for their sake, I hope they catch on. I hope they sign millions of dollars of contracts because, they deserve it. They've been busting their butts for years. But also, realistically now, one or two of them might see a little bit of playing time this year.
Well, thankfully, too, with NIL, these guys aren't as reliant on money. They're getting the boost in college. So if they don't get picked as high as they hope or expected, then they have, some money to fall back on, which I think is pretty neat.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you tonight is, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but who do you think had the best and who do you think had the worst draft of teams? Just on the spot.
I think the Ravens had the best draft. I know a lot of people say the Jets and the Giants. They did what they were expected to do, but the Ravens didn't move up or anything. They went into the draft with 1 first-round pick, and they left with 2. Getting Leonard, Baum, and Hamilton, guys are going to start immediately. And then the fact that they were able to get David Ojabo, who, if he hadn't torn his Achilles at his pro day, he would have probably been a top 15 pick. He could have slid, who knows what would have happened. But you're essentially getting 3 first-round picks for the price of 1.
Basically, Ojabo is probably going to have to redshirt, or not even redshirt, but he probably wasn't going to be super impactful his rookie year. He was really raw, but now he gets to redshirt for a year or half a year. It's kind of like Joel Embiid, to make an NBA parallel, where he was a pretty high pick based on potential, but was going to miss a lot of his first year because of injury. In Embiid's case, he missed all of his first year. I think he missed both of his first 2 years. Maybe that was Ben Simmons. But he missed all of his first year, and then he came back and had a year under the training staff and was really good. And I think Ojabo was going to have the same thing.
Yeah, they took Owa last year, and then now they have Ojabo, and they got Derek Wolfe right now. But presumably, when Ojabo's healthy, he'll move to defensive end. And you got both of those guys, Michael Pierce and Patrick Queen. I'm just looking at their defense. It's pretty impressive. Right now, surprisingly, they don't have Hamilton starting over Marcus Williams, which is kind of interesting.
I think that's interesting, too. They did sign Marcus Williams, but I think they signed Marcus Williams not expecting Hamilton, because Hamilton at the time was a top 3. I saw had some people having the Lions taking him at 2 at that time when they signed Marcus Williams.
He could also start over Chuck Clark. He's going to start. But
I think that's more likely. I think the more likely is that he starts over Chuck Clark. But I think it was kind of funny because they were showing David Ojabo's NFL player comparison, and it was Owe. And so now they're both lining up across from each other. And so, it was a pretty good pick. They were every single pick too. They said, this is a real Baltimore Ravens pick for every single Baltimore Ravens pick, which I thought was very fitting. What about worst?
I said about it earlier. I didn't really like the Jaguars. I think they took a risk on both their first-round picks, and it could have a lot of upside, but I just don't think they're a team that can really afford to do that. But also, the flip side is you could say they don't have much to lose.
Yeah, but, worst case, if Trayvon Walker isn't good, you get the first pick again next year.
Yeah, but I wasn't a huge fan of their draft, and I didn't like the Patriots either.
They drafted a guy who had 8 career sacks, number 1 overall. So, very interesting. You said it, but the Patriots, I think, was my least favorite. They do their own thing. Bill Belichick is, proven year in and year out. He's willing to take a couple of his guys a round or 2 or 3 higher than most people take them. A couple of years ago, he took Kyle Duggar in the 2nd round. That pick ended up working out really well. So who am I to make fun of Bill Belichick? But on paper, it seems like they reached for their first couple of picks like pretty heavily, and I don't know. I think that people are also ragging on the 49ers draft, if I remember correctly. Like people had that as one of the worst ranked drafts. They did okay. They drafted Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy, but yeah, Drake Jackson was like their big pick in the second round. Then they picked LSU's running back.
I liked the Drake Jackson pick. Drake Jackson was a potential first round guy.
Yeah, that's how narratives changed, though. Drake Jackson was a potential first-round guy, like, coming into the draft. I think he fell, and, like, everyone knew he wasn't going to be a first-round guy. But it's funny because it's one of those things where at the beginning, like, if the draft started right after the season, people would have been, like, pretty happy getting Drake Jackson in the second round. And so, same with, like, I'll use the Commanders. Sam Howell in the 5th round, people would have been ecstatic. That's like, insane value. And then it's wild to me how things can change so quickly over the course of like 2 months, especially because it's weird that opinions change of players that much because they have like the game tape already. You have years of tape on these players, 3 years at least. And then like how fast you can run 40 yards in a straight line can drop you 2-3 rounds. Like it's kind of wild to me. That's why I think, and I hope it, for our sake, it's not always. I think that teams put too much stock into the combine sometimes. Like Orlando Brown is always my go-to example. You watch him play, and he was just incredible, but he had a bad combine day, dropped to the second round or whatever, and then ended up being pretty dang good.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's all I have, unless you have anything else for.
I got two. I mean, I feel like we broke everything down pretty good. Hopefully, we'll have all three of us will be here on Thursday. You never really know.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll be here. So, yeah. But I mean, thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll be back with Bama Brigade on Thursday. We can talk about all the Alabama stuff. Maybe Jordan Addison will transfer to us by then. Who knows? Anything can happen. Bye. See you.